Good morning, Year 5. On to Chapter 8, The Prefects' Meeting. We won't speak to her, Lloyd said. Not ever again. Understand, H? He pulled on his sock with such ferocity that his big toe came out the other end. With a shout of rage, he flung the sock into the wastepaper basket and took a clean one out of the drawer. But how can we not? Harvey said miserably. She doesn't know anyone except us. If we don't talk to her... Black bananas, think I care about that after the way she's treated us? You're too soft, H. That's what's wrong with you. Well, just watch it. If I catch you speaking to her, I won't look after you anymore. And I'll tell the others not to look after you either. Then you'll be in trouble. Ramming his shoes on, Lloyd stamped off downstairs, and a moment later an unhappy Harvey followed him. They sat hunched over their plates of porridge, turned away from Dinah and talking only to each other. From time to time Lloyd glanced at her to see what effect they were having, but it was impossible to tell. She went on eating her breakfast without speaking, her cold, pale face gazing off into the distance. When the time came to leave, she followed them out into the hall and left the house with them, but they marched along the road 10 metres ahead of her, not looking over their shoulders. Just let her dare to try and catch us up, Lloyd muttered. She won't do that, Harvey said. She's too proud. Oh, shut up. I don't want you going on about her all day. She's not here. She doesn't exist. Understand? Lloyd strode faster up the road and swept into the playground, his eyes searching about. We must find Ian and Mandy and Ingrid and warn them about her. Tell them not to talk to her either. Then she'll only have the goody-goodies that she won't get much fun out of then. He saw the other three in a corner and marched across to them, followed by Harvey. But before he could say anything, silence fell over the playground, and everyone turned to look at the prefects. There seemed to be something odd about them today. They were smirking at each other and hunting round the playground with their eyes, as if they were looking for somebody. Suddenly Ian poked Lloyd in the ribs. "Hey," he mouthed soundlessly. "Why are they all looking at Harvey?" It was true. 6 pairs of eyes had fixed on Harvey's chubby figure, and 6 smiles had grown wider. Harvey started to shake. Mandy reached out and gripped his hand comfortingly. "Don't worry," she mouthed. "It might not be as bad as you think." But Harvey was already worried. As the prefects rapped out their orders and the children started to move into lines, he caught at Lloyd's sleeve. "Don't leave me alone, El." "OK," Lloyd patted his shoulder. "We'll stick together." As they moved across the playground, he avoided his usual place and went to stand in Harvey's line instead, immediately behind him. He saw Dinah glance quickly across at him, but he ignored her. "Lead in," Jeff shouted. As the lines began to move, Lloyd put a steadying hand on Harvey's arm, and the two of them walked together up the steps. When they were nearly at the top, Rose stuck out a hand, blocking Harvey's way. "Harvey Hunter," she intoned, "you are summoned to appear before the Prefects' Council at 10 o'clock. "Why?" Harvey said plaintively. "I haven't done anything." "That's right," Lloyd blustered. "Leave him alone." Rose gave him an icy stare. "You're in the wrong line, Lloyd Hunter." "That's because I'm sticking by Harvey. I don't know what you're plotting, but I'm coming too." He saw Rose open her mouth to protest, and he said quickly, "Even in the courts, people are allowed to have lawyers to speak for them." Rather to his surprise, Rose shrugged. "Please yourself. You can be Harvey's lawyer. It won't do any men any good. 10 o'clock. For an hour, Lloyd sat in his classroom, chewing the end of his pencil. All around him, people were scribbling industriously, writing facts about the British Constitution. Lloyd did not know the facts, as usual, but this morning he didn't even care. All he could think of was the minute hand on the clock on the wall. It seemed to be racing round towards 10 o'clock at twice its normal speed. At 5 to 10, he stuck his hand up. "Yes," barked Mr. Venables, looking startled. People hardly ever put their hands up. It wasn't encouraged. "Please, sir, I've got to go to the Prefects' Council." Mr. Venables frowned. "I wasn't informed. This is most disorderly." "I've got to go," Lloyd insisted. Without even waiting for an answer, he bounded out of his seat and made his way to the door. He could see Dinah watching him, and he almost pulled a face at her, and then he remembered no communication. Outside the door of the prefect's room, Harvey was standing shivering. "Oh, what do you think's going on? What are they going to do to me now?" "Dunno. We'll have to go in and find out." Lloyd slapped him encouragingly on the back. "Cheer up. At least the snow's melted. They can't make us do that again anyway." Boldly he hammered on the door and heard Jeff's voice say, "Come in." The prefects were sitting in a line behind a long table, their faces grave and their uniforms immaculate. Each of them had a pen clipped neatly into the top blazer pocket at precisely the same angle, and their hands were folded on the table in front of them in a straight row, 6 doubled fists. Sit down, said Rose, pointing at 2 chairs drawn up on the other side of the table. What's this all about? Lloyd muttered. What's going on? Sit down, Rose said again, more curtly, and don't speak unless we ask you a question. Lloyd and Harvey took the 2 chairs and sat facing the row of accusing eyes. Slowly, Geoff reached out for a grey folder which lay on the table. A neat label on the front said Harvey Hunter. Opening it, he pulled out a piece of paper. Harvey Hunter, he began, we have called you before us on the instructions of the headmaster to deal with your disobedient and disorderly behaviour this week. He has been most displeased with you. Rose nodded. You're a disruptive influence in the school. That's nonsense, Lloyd burst out. He's never influenced anybody. Please be quiet, said Geoff, and listen to the charges. He looked down at the piece of paper. You are accused of 3 things. First, on Monday you came into school, before you were called in by us, although you know it's against the rules to come in early. Have you anything to say? I was going to do the registers, Harvey faltered. The headmaster told me to. Geoff shook his head and ran a finger down the paper. Clearly rubbish. My information is that Sharon Mandeville did the registers on Monday. It was a mistake, Lloyd said quietly. The headmaster changed his mind. The headmaster never changes his mind, Rose said crushingly. Indecision is disorder. Second, Geoff went on relentlessly, later the same day, in the afternoon, you left your classroom telling Rose that you wanted to go to the toilet. Instead, you went up to the hall to spy on the assembly, which you are not permitted to attend. Harvey gasped and turned to look at Lloyd, but this time Lloyd could only shrug. Third, Geoff said, yesterday in the playground you threw 2 snowballs, although you knew that playing anywhere on the school premises is most strictly forbidden. But that's not fair, Lloyd shouted. He's already been punished for that. The prefects took action as they saw fit, Rose said crushingly, but the matter has not yet been dealt with by the headmaster. We are now acting under his instructions. I don't believe you, Lloyd said. If the headmaster wants to deal with Harvey, why wouldn't he see him himself? But even as he spoke the words, he knew they were stupid. Simultaneously, the figures around the table chanted, the prefects are the voice of the headmaster. They must be obeyed. Well, said Lloyd desperately, if you're the voice of the headmaster, then when you punished Harvey yesterday, that was a punishment from the headmaster, and it isn't fair to give him another one. Harvey twisted his hands together wretchedly. Oh, well, what's the use? This isn't really like a court. They're not going to let me off, whatever you say. Why don't we just shut up and hear what they're going to do to me? Rose gave a patronising smile. I'm pleased to see that one of you has some sense, especially since the headmaster has decided to be merciful. He has? Harvey looked disbelieving. Rose nodded. He will give you a chance to redeem yourself. She reached into the file and drew out a long white envelope with Harvey's name written on the front. He has sent you a paper of sums to do. If you get them all right, your offences will be forgotten, this time. But if you get any of them wrong, the headmaster will deal with you himself, most severely. Harvey gulped. Is that all? Can I go? Geoff nodded. Go straight back to your classroom and get on with your work. The sums are not to be done until you get home. He smiled sarcastically. You never know. If you do them well enough, you might land up on Eddie Hare's great school quiz. Lloyd snorted. I can just see us being the headmaster's blue-eyed boys. Ignoring Geoff's frown, he made for the door. As soon as he and Harvey were safely outside, he exploded. Of all the stupid, trumped-up, unfair charges. Harvey looked sideways at him, his eyes scared. But how did they know, Elle? About me going into school early and going to look at the assembly. No one knew about both things, only me and you. Lloyd stopped in the middle of the corridor. Yes, he said softly. Exploding eggshells. There was someone else who knew. Dinah saw you going to school early and you told her that you watched the assembly. But she wouldn't have told, would she? Lloyd pulled a face. Of course she would. It's all her fault you're in trouble. Like yesterday. That was her fault too. Then he saw Harvey start to look upset and he put an arm round his shoulders. Never mind, it could be worse. They've only given you sums to do and you're quite good at sums. I expect they're hard, Harvey faltered. Let's have a look. Harvey ripped open the envelope and pulled out 3 sheets of paper folded together. He glanced at them briefly and then said in a horrified voice, Elle, I'll never work out the answers. I can't even understand the questions. Let me see. Lloyd snatched the papers out of his hand. I can always help you. He began to read with scornful confidence, but a moment later he too was looking completely baffled. You see, Harvey said, we can't. Oh, what am I going to do? Lloyd took the envelope and pushed the papers back into it. We'll let Mandy have a look. She's quite good at sums, and if that doesn't work out, we'll show them to Mum when we get home. She'll help you if she can, and if she can't, all at once he looked pleased. She'll see they're much too difficult for you. Then even she will have to admit there's something peculiar going on. When they got home, Mrs. Hunter was sitting in the kitchen having a cup of tea with Dinah. Lloyd walked straight past Dinah without even looking at her. "Mum, we want to talk to you." "Well, of course," Mrs. Hunter smiled. "Have a cup of tea." Lloyd's fingers flicked his fingers impatiently. "No, we want to talk to you alone." At once his mother stiffened. "I've told you about that before. Dinah's a member of the family and you must treat her like one. If you've got anything to say, you can say it with her here." "But you don't understand," Lloyd began sulkily. "Please, El," Harvey broke in, "don't waste time. Just show her the sums." He pulled the papers out of the envelope and threw them on the table. "The headmaster gave them to him," Lloyd said, "and they're terrible. You must help him." Mrs. Hunter shook her head. "Now you know you mustn't cheat. If the headmaster gave them to Harvey, he means for him to do them by himself." "But, Mum, I can't," Harvey said pathetically. "They're awful. Just look." Mrs. Hunter picked up the paper and scanned it. Then she gave a little laugh. "It's no use. Doesn't mean anything to me. I don't understand any of this new mathematics you all do." "It's not new maths," Harvey shouted. "It's just incredibly difficult." Now, dear," Mrs. Hunter said a little sharply. "Calm down. Let me give you a cup of tea. Then you can go away quietly by yourself and look at it. I'm sure you'll find it's all right when you think about it. The headmaster wouldn't be unreasonable." "That's what you think," Lloyd said bitterly. "He's a maniac." "Don't be silly," Mrs. Hunter said. "I'm sure he's not a maniac, is he, Dinah?" With an expression of utter misery on her face, Dinah said, "The headmaster is a marvellous man, and this is the best school I've ever been to." "It's no good asking her," Lloyd shouted. "It's all her fault. She's the one who got Harvey into trouble." "Me?" Dinah said. "Yes, you." He glared at her and she stared back, looking completely baffled. "Oh, what's the use of quarrelling?" Harvey said desperately. "What does it matter? All that matters is that I've got these sums to do and I can't do them. And nobody can help me and it's going to be awful." He snatched up the papers and ran out of the room, banging the door behind him. "See what you've done?" Lloyd shouted at Dinah. "Oh, I wish you'd never come." He ran after Harvey, banging the door again, and found himself in the playroom, huddled in a chair. His shoulders were shaking and he was beginning to sob fiercely. "Oh, H, do stop it. That won't help." "Nothing will help," said Harvey in a totally wretched voice. "I shan't be able to do the sums, and tomorrow I'll have to go and see the headmaster, and it will be frightful, and oh!" With a loud wail, he buried himself deep in the cushions. At that moment, the playroom door opened again. "Please may I see the sums?" said a stiff little voice from the doorway. Okay, guys, see you tomorrow.